All right, everybody, welcome to the Angular live stream. Listen, friends, listen. First and foremost, how are you doing? What's going on? Tell me what's going on. Everybody in the chat, let me know what's happening. Hopefully, you are so excited because today we're going to be doing something special. We're always doing something special first and foremost. But today is the day. My good friend and colleague Devin is going to be back in the building and he's going to continue building out his Agentic app, the Storybot app. And look, you see my glasses cleaner on the table too today because I was cleaning my glasses. I got my laptop here. Man, you can still see that. See, usually I have it angled where you can't see, and you can see my phone. Too much stuff is on the screen. Everybody get out of my business. Everybody get out of my business. Michael Small in the building. What's going on? Good to see you. Let's get locked in. All right, let's get Devin in the building. I think Devin's ready. Okay. Locked in. What's up? What's up? Let's get Devin. We need Devin. Devin's in the building. What's up, Devin?
Hello, hello.
Good to see you. Good to see you. All right. We got people tuned in. Okay. Hello. Where you tuning in from, people? People, let me know what's going on. Devin, why don't you get your environment set up so we can kick things off and let the people know what we're going to be doing as well. That'd be great.
Yeah, let's do it. Let me present, and then I will be better at talking because
Yeah, don't worry about
multitasking is
it.
hard.
Yeah, that's right. Get it set up. All right. What's up, Jerome? What's going on? All right, Esna, what's going on? First, I don't know if I've seen you on the stream before. Good to have you. All right, Yuri, what's up? Yuri in the building. Hello from India. Inner engineering. Okay, let's go. Hello, I love Angular. Listen, you are a valuable part of the Angular community, and we appreciate you. Thank you for coming to hang out. Thank you for coming to hang out. Now, friends, if you're curious about, if you see something that we're working on and you're like, how do I get involved with building AI apps? There is something really special. In the link of this video, we have a link to GitHub where we have our examples hosted. So if you want to see this example and you want to practice with it, which we encourage, once you go ahead and check out the link github.com/angular/examples. That's pretty good. Oh, you could have kept it up, Devin. You're all good, brother.
Yeah, I shared the wrong thing. So
Oh,
give me a sec.
all right. I want to see how our stars are doing on GitHub. That's what I care about. Let's see. How's our GitHub stars doing? 164. Okay, friends, that's amazing. You know, when we did the first one of these, we only had like 40 stars and we're up to 164 stars. That is amazing. That is amazing. Hello, Natalia. How are you? Hello. Darmesh, what's up? Walid, what's up, brother? How are you? Oh, okay. Osama coming in from Egypt. Welcome. Hello, I'm an Angular developer from Angular V2. So memorable moments. We remember you from the beginning, it sounds like. Very nice. All right, let's see. Vikram, hello, Angular developer. Okay, can you brief who can watch this video? Good question. So ideally, you would have seen the previous live stream where Devin started this work, where we worked on this Angular examples repo. However, it's open to everybody. Devin is excellent at explaining his work. So if you haven't seen where we started from, it's still okay to continue with us. But this one is a little bit more advanced. It's not quite beginner, though. Would you agree with that, Devin?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think what I'll do is just do a really brief walkthrough of what we covered last time. And if you can tell me if we need a little more, but I really do want to jump into the code. So I'll try to keep it short. But before I do, for those of you who did tune in last time, I'm curious, has anybody actually gone ahead and tried running this app themselves and made some stories? You just let us know in the comments.
Yeah,
While you do that, I'm going to shift to a blank screen. Nope, I'm going to shift over here. So I'm going to do a super fast walkthrough of what this app is, what we've already built, and then we're just going to dive right into the code because part one, which hopefully Mark can, thank you, Mark. Our part one is on our channel, on the Angular channel in the live stream section. So in part one, we built, I'd say more than half of the app, got through a lot of the kind of the nitty gritty and explained a lot about Genkit, how it works, why to use it. And then we got into the fun part where we're actually building an Angular. And just when we got there, we ran out of time. So we thought it'd be fun to finish this. And, maybe in the future, we'll keep adding to it. We'll see. So with that, let's jump in. So this is the app that we are building and that we've started to build. And basically what this is, it's an interactive, choose your own adventure, uh, graphic novel builder. So what you do is on the left here, you've got this component, and you can user import form, and this is where you set the stage for your story, right? So you enter things like what kind of story is it, where does it take place, how many characters, anything like that. As you do that, you can update the story, and this little pane on the right here will update. And once you're satisfied with that story, you go ahead and choose an option in the right here, and that'll kick off your adventure. And then you keep doing a choose your own adventure story as you go, because as you get to the kind of the end of each story part, there will be a little bit of a, decision point, a fork in the road, what should we do next? So you pick and choose. So let's do a really quick walkthrough of the app infrastructure before we dive into some code. So this is the full app component. We've got one component, which we call our story component, and that's everything in this blue box. And that contains this little primary objective thing up top, the story parts, as well as this child component here. And it also has these image components. And today, this is going to be a big focus, working with Imagine in order to generate these images. Then we have our final component, which is a user input component, which we use in two different places in two different ways, which is kind of an interesting use case. And then finally, I'll just walk through what we're actually doing. So I told you what this first box does. Under the hood, what's going on is it's actually calling a Genkit flow to update the story premise, come up with the next question, give you some options. Whereas this one, on the other hand, gives you the next part to the story, choices for what you could do next. And once you kick that off, that means you can no longer customize the story. So we'll hide this component on the left, and it'll look more like this. And that's actually probably where we'll start before we fix a bug. And just to show you, there's a lot of different variations of these components. Like these are all different variations of the story component. These are all the same component. This is all the user input component. And you can see how we just use some simple logic in order to try to make all these different views here, which I think is pretty neat. And then finally, we've got our image component, and this is what we'll be focusing on also today, where we can leverage the resource API. And if you're not familiar, we'll run through that too, because it's relatively new, where we can leverage some of the built-in features of resource in order to show loading status, success status, and fail status here. I'm using server routing and an SSR app. If you do want to add this to your app, here are some commands you could use. We're getting close to where we left off last time. So this is the story component. And I think one of the key parts here, if you're looking through the code and wondering why we use, for example, linked signal here, this is a way to persist UI components while the resource is loading. This is just kind of a recipe that you might want to have in your bag of tricks because it comes in handy from time to time. And then as far as the story parts, I'll walk through this quickly because this is where we're going to pick up. Basically, the Genkit flow returns a few different story parts, an array of 3 different story parts. And as we receive each one, we have a linked signal called story parts. And what we'll do is we'll add to it with each new response. And that's effectively what this says. All right, so this is where I'm going to stop because this is where I think I messed up last time. But basically, if the story is loading, we could take advantage of the resources is loading property in order to show this little placeholder. And then the next thing we'll do is we will hide this. This is something else I didn't do last time. Yeah, let's just jump into some code. What do you folks say?
Let's do it.
Anything else before I dive in, Mark?
Well, I was going to say this real quick. We got someone from Japan said it's midnight, but they can't miss the live streaming. To you, I say, irashaimase. Irashaimase. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Hello, everyone. Ole. What's up, Ole? It's good to see you. Okay. Yeah, just jump into some code. I think the streets are ready for some code. Let's zoom in just a little bit. Yeah, that's good right there. That's good because I'm watching from my web browser. I want to make sure that if I can see it from there, hopefully it's visible.
All right. Well, hopefully we won't be doing too much here. But basically, what I did, so if you watched the last live stream, all I did was create a commit where we stopped. So we're picking up exactly where we left off. So if you want to go back, watch the other one later on, and then pick up here, totally cool. But all we're going to do is just run a little ng serve. And hopefully that might be the end of this terminal session, minus some debugging. We'll see. All right. So got localhost running. And
does this app need an API key or does it run locally? What does that mean for people who want to try this app, Devin?
Oh, great question. So you do need an API key, and there are a few different ways to set it. The way I've done it, which is probably the easiest way in development, is just set a local environment variable called, it's in here. So the instructions is a good segue. The instructions are all in here. If you do want to get started, it's called Gemini API key. So I created mine using this link here. And then I just set the environment variable, good to go.
Yeah, right. And so for both, and all of our starter kits come with READMEs that have directions. So you can definitely check those out for more information.
Cool. So this is where we left off. We have our story. So it's generating story parts, which is pretty cool. It's giving us next steps for the rest of the story. It is giving us the option to customize the story. Let's try something out. Next question. Yep. Let's see if we can update the story. Can we update the story? All right. Maybe that's a good place to start. All right. So we need to update our story somehow, and I have a feeling that's supposed to be working. So if we were to look at our terminal, let's see if we have any issues here. No. All right. So that's odd. Check here. Let's just do one more reload, see if maybe that's the issue. So right now it's loading story parts. Next question. Update. All right, we've got an issue. Let's dive in. So we go in here. Where we left off was our story parts. So actually that particular button, we might not have hooked up yet. And I think that's the problem. But the first thing I want to do, actually, before we do that, let's test out one other piece of functionality here. Let's see if we can actually begin our adventure. That would mean once we select one of these options as to what the characters should do next, we hit begin your adventure. Two things should happen. One, we get these loading stories, and then it should append to the story. Nope, we've got an issue. And yeah, all right, we'll have some fun today. Let's get to it. But one of the things I did want to point out is when we actually load this story, we should have the existing story, and then following the existing story, we have our loading boxes. Right now, that's actually not how we're doing things, and it looks like we've got some issues here. We'll get to that. So with that, let's head over to our story component here. And one of the things we did was we have, if there are if the story resource is loading, and just as a refresher to anyone who wasn't here last time, we have this story resource, and it takes a request of, get out of here, story input. And this is from our story service. And basically, this is just something that a signal that we set each time we want a new story. And once this changes, that will run the loader function in our story resource. And just to catch anyone up, I'll make this a little bigger. So just to catch anyone up, that's kind of the basic premise of how resources work. A resource, as a reminder, is effectively a container for a signal-based container that is for asynchronous data returned from your server. And you have a request that's basically what it's looking at. If that changes, we run the loader with the request, and we have this little run flow method here. This is from the Genkit beta library, and this is just a really handy function to have to call a Genkit endpoint. Just makes your life a little bit easier. We'll pass in the URL, which takes an endpoint, as well as the user input, which is the request, and then we have a session ID here. So with that, if we go back to this is actually too big for me to see, so I have to make it a little smaller. So as you can see here, we say if it's loading, let's render this loading stories set of elements here. Otherwise, we'll render the story parts. But that's actually not what we want to do. Instead, what we want to do is always show the story parts. And then if it's loading, then we want to show the story parts after, effectively pending it to the end. So someone asked, what is the run flow? Yeah, so this is, I think, one of the trickiest things of today's stream is going to be catching folks up. So if at all I breeze over things that I covered last time, feel free to stop me and I will be more than happy to run through any of this. So run flow is a method that basically is exposed by the Genkit client library. And it's just an easy way to run what's called a flow in Genkit. And a flow in Genkit is just a way to run some sort of generative API call. And just to take a step back, because I don't want to lose anyone here. This is what a flow looks like. I'm going to make this a little smaller just so I can see it. So for example, this is our continue story flow. I'll make it bigger again. And each flow has an input schema. We have user input and a session ID, as well as an output schema. And this tells Genkit how the input should be structured, as well as how the output should be structured. And then basically in here, every flow has this async function where you do something like this line here, await chat.send. And effectively what you're doing is you're just sending some sort of prompt to the LLM. In our case, it's Gemini. So you're sending some sort of prompt to Gemini, and then you'll get a response back. We structure the response, and then this is all exposed via, if we look at our server, all we have to do, since I'm using an SSR app, this is the way that I added my Genkit flows, and I have one called Continue Story Flow. I use this express handler. Again, this is just a little helper method exposed by Genkit that makes it really easy to call these flows. So the very long answer to your short question, what is run flow? It's a very easy way to call this endpoint. So back to where we were in the story component. So all we're going to do here is, rather than have an if-else statement, we are going to actually remove this else, remove this here, and just move this right underneath. And now let's go ahead and see if that works. So if that wasn't clear, what we're doing is, for each one of our story parts, we'll show one of those little boxes. And then if it's loading, then we'll show 3. So let's give it a try. So I'll reload. Did our little story. So now you can see these are the loading boxes, but since our story parts was empty, there weren't any story parts showing. So now if we come back down here, select an option, begin our adventure. So now instead of overwriting what was already there, our story persists. We have these loading boxes, And once it's done, it keeps going. And here you can see we could just keep doing that. All right, so I think that was objective one, fix the loading stories. I'm gonna give myself a pat on the back, and if you're following along, you should do that too. And I think from here, let's move to the update story button. Actually, before we do, I said something earlier, maybe you caught, which was once we update this story, the option to customize the story should go away. And this is actually a pretty easy fix. So if we come into so those forms are driven by a component called a user input component. And in here, we have a little handle submit method that we wrote last time. And in here, we have this little if statement. And this is checking if this is the description flow. And to catch anyone up who wasn't here last time, effectively, because we have the same component able to call two separate flows, right? This can either call the description flow, that's the box on the left of the page, or the continue story flow, which is on the right of the page. So we need to know which one of those endpoints we're actually calling. And in order to do that, what we did was we created the user input component with some inputs. And these are passed via the parent component. So here you can see we have our input endpoint, and then we just have a little computed signal and just say, is this the description flow? Meaning, is this the box on the left? Basically, if the endpoint equals description flow, then yes. Otherwise, no. So then in our handle submit function method that we wrote last time, if it's the description flow, we know we're going to set the premise input, which in our story service is the signal that one of our resources looks at. But on the other hand, we're going to set this story input, which is what we were just looking at previously. With the user input, we're going to set has story started to true, and we'll clear the user input. So, and we could actually just move this down. That's better. So what we're not doing is we're not conditionally rendering that left-hand component based on whether the story has started. So let's go ahead and do that. And that would be in our app component, because that is the parent of the direct parent of the user component in that case. Okay. But we want the template. All right. So this is our app component. We've got a little header. We've got our user input component, and then we have the story component. That is basically just the setup of this very basic component. And all we want to do here is add an if statement. Okay. So if, let's just see if we have the story service. Yep, we do have access to the story service here, which we've injected via dependency injection. So if story service dot has story started, or rather, if the story hasn't started, then we will show this little part. And I think that should do it. So if we were to go back into, okay. So let's reload the page. That way we can see. Oh wait, no, I think I did that backwards. If the story, no, I think that's right. Let's see. All right, looks like we have an issue. This is always where we have some fun. All right, so initially, has story started should be false, meaning we should show that component on the left. However, it's not showing, and before I do anything too crazy, let's just restart the server. Thank you. I love this community. Where am I missing? Yeah. All right, who's new to signals here? This is something that never gets old. Got to remember to put those parentheses. Thank you so much. And let's give this one more try. Okay. Reload our page. Yeah, so with signals, those are actually functions. So you do have to remember to put those parentheses. If you're new to signals, this is something you might run into, but you'll get used to it. All right, so now we're here. Theoretically, if we do that, now look at this. I'll just make it smaller so it looks prettier, even though we can't read it. So we come in here, and this is that full story view. Now we're cooking, right? And one of the cool things that you'll notice is, and I said this last time, all of these story parts are going to keep sticking together chronologically. So the story will make sense over time. And a lot of that has to do with how we've structured the Genkit flows on the back. And I'm not going to talk too much about that now because I really want to get through the code. Uh, but if you are curious, either watch the first stream, take a look at the code, or if we have time at the end and you're curious, I can definitely go into that. But I have some other kind of Genkit working with Gemini tricks, specifically on the image side. So let's do that. So with that, now I think our next objective is fix this update story button, right? This isn't actually doing anything because when we come here and we hit fantasy, update story, nothing's happening. And I think we just haven't wired that up yet. So we can do that in a second. But one thing I wanted to point out is, and this is kind of an interesting just a UX observation that I had. So you'll notice that this works a lot faster. This all of these questions, like that's a lot faster than the stories, and you'll see that when I load the entire app. And I think part of that is the LLM is just doing a lot more for this one. And originally, when I designed this, I actually had everything update at the same time, right? So I'd hit fantasy, next question, and everything would update. But from a UX perspective, I was finding that was a little bit slow. So this was a kind of a design decision I made on my part as the developer to say, how can I make this a smoother UX experience? And this might be something you come across with any sort of server, but I thought in this case, when working with generative AI, this is one of those cases where it was really important to have kind of a smooth user experience so people can have some fun. All right, so let's dive into has story started. So that would be in our user component. And if we look here, where is our update story button? Update story here. Yep, so we've got our button, but it doesn't actually do anything. So what we need to do here is we actually need to call this would be the description flow, which is that same flow that updates the initial, or actually, sorry, this would be the begin story flow. So we have, and I'll just go to the server page for a second. So we have 4 different flows we use. Description flow is responsible for that component on the left. Begin story flow generates the first 3 panels of the story. Continue story flow keeps generating each subsequent set of 3 panels of the story. And then image flow generates our images, which we'll get to once we're done with this part. So what we'll do is we want to call begin story flow when somebody hits that update story button. So let's see where that begin story flow is. I actually don't even remember. All right, so we've got our story service. This is, let's see, we've got a resource here. And our URL is always description flow. We go to our story component. We have request. The endpoint is either begin flow or continue flow. So, and that's, I think that's different than what I said before. So I think this is me correcting myself from earlier. So the two endpoints that we could choose from when we were deciding, is this, oh, no. I was right before. So we were in the user component. All right, I'm counting on you all to keep me honest here. So, all right, so we're in our story component, and this will either call the begin story flow or the continue story flow. So that means in our user component, what we want to do, this resource is looking at story input. So that's what we want to set whenever somebody clicks that button. So let's head over to our user input component. Actually, we'll go to the TypeScript class. And this will be, let's call it handle update story. And once we do this, so we know if this is the description flow, meaning this is the component on the left, then we want to call it with then we want the input, the endpoint to be the begin story flow. Otherwise, we want it to be the end story flow. So before we get started, let's just say when this is clicked, let's say this dot story service, and we want story input dot set, and we'll make that. So this actually isn't going to be the user input. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to take the most recent story premise returned from the story service. Because if you look here, this is our story service, and we have a premise resource, and this is what generates the beginnings of those stories, right? And each time this is returned, this is what it looks like. We've got a new story premise, and this is basically returning just a concept of the story. Here is what the story is about. The next question, which is, where does it take place, how many characters, so on and so forth, and then a bunch of options. But what we're interested in is this story premise field here. So what we can do is we can, in our user input component, we're going to set this to this dot story service dot, this will be our premise resource dot value dot story premise. And I think that should do it. I don't remember offhand if I need to explicitly set the endpoint, but I think we'll find out together. Let's go ahead and do that. All right. Stranger strings. All right, fantasy. And then let's see what happens. Update story. And nada. And nope. And I'm waiting on one of you to tell me what I did wrong, as usual. So story input dot set. That should automatically trigger this. However,
Go back to your code real quick. I
Yeah.
didn't see what your line 49 was at the end. What is story promise? Is that a string or something?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Just making sure it wasn't like a nested signal or something. And you've got parentheses there. Handle update story. This store service.
Oh, I didn't actually set. I didn't bind the.
I was gonna say you probably didn't bind it. That's all I was thinking. Something
Yeah.
around that lane. Okay.
All right. Well,
Devin,
that's
I'm still here, but I just felt like I was taking up space on screen, and I was
all
like
good.
letting you go for it, and I'm monitoring the chat, so I'm still around.
Thank you. All right. Handle update story. All right, now let's try that again. And thanks to HMR, hot module replacement, I've got my exact same state. I didn't have to reload the page, which is pretty nice. So come in here, update story, and our story is updated. All right, let's try that again. Let's say like make the main character's name Devin.
Wow, main character energy, Devin. Unbelievable.
Yeah, just in that kind of mood today.
Just in that kind of
All right, so it works.
Wait, no. So zoom in. I want to read this.
Ah,
I want to read it. Devin, a young wanderer, found himself at the edge of whispering woods. The air hung heavily with the scent of pine and damp earth, and an unnatural silence blanketed the ancient trees. He carried I thought it said warm map. The font is a little hard. So I was like, wait, what? A warm map. He carried a worn map clutched in his hands, its faded ink depicting a path to the legendary Sunstone. To the Sunstone. Love it. Keep going.
beautiful. Yeah, actually, we have a. I think I made a short of the app before the first one, just to kind of get folks interested. I think one of the top comments was, "This font choice is atrocious," which I thought was hilarious.
No, you gotta love comments. So every time I see a comment, I don't take it personally because I'm like, it's just
Oh, I
people on the
love
internet,
it.
man.
It's great. It's great. All right, so we got that working. However, there's an interesting thing here, right? So we don't always want this button to show, right? There's nothing to update. The story premise is exactly what it was before, right? So how do we conditionally render this button? Well, if we go, all right, so we're going to display this button if 3 different conditions are met. So 1, has the premise been updated? Is that true? 2, we got to make sure the premise resource isn't loading. And then 3, has the story started? We want to make sure that's false. So when we click that button, so we'll do that. This is actually what this would have been helpful before. Did all this prep and forgot about it. So this is just what we did a moment ago. When we click, we update the story input with what did I say before? With the premise resource, and then that triggers the loader in our story resource. We'll come back to that. All right, so I kind of did this in reverse, but let's keep going. So this is what we're going to focus on now. 1, we want to make sure the premise has premise updated. Cool. Some fun CSS comments here. So we've got, I am trying to, so should alias the, yes, I could alias that with atrocious. I would love that. What else do we have?
What?
Uh,
Michael Small, how dare you?
Zion, the reason that I pre-wrote all the CSS was because it takes me so long to do the simplest things in CSS. So that's why I was like, let me do that before, and hopefully it'll all just work.
All right, you do have a technical question I think you should get to.
Yeah.
What's the
What is
benefit
the
of
benefit
using
of
this
using
keyword
the
in a template?
keyword in this keyword in template? Where did I do that?
It's no benefit. He just did
None.
it. Yeah. There you go. Still works.
Great question. Okay. So with that, where were we? So we have that update story button. So we only want to render this if those 3 conditions are met. So the first one was, has the premise updated been true? And I don't remember if we actually set that. So let's go to our story service. We have has premise updated is not yet here. Okay. So this is going to be let's see. what should we use for has premise updated? So basically, each time we get a response from this premise resource and it's different than the previous response, then we know that we should set that to true. So I think this would be a good use case for linked signal. So let's make a new linked signal. And we have a couple here already. Linked signal, if you weren't here last time, is one of my favorite APIs. And it's really helpful just because it's able to connect kind of the past with the future. It sounds so meta. It's a signal where you get access to prior state and you can leverage that automatically. That way you don't have to set this manually and like try to figure out when things are happening in the trace of your user actions and so forth. So let's just walk through it. I've already kind of walked through linked signal signatures in the last one, but I'll do it again because I do think it's really helpful. So we have what did I call it? Has premise updated. Has premise updated. We're going to make this a linked signal. We have two types we have to declare. This would be, the first one is the source. And the source is similar to the request that I said in the resource. And this is effectively the signal that we're looking at. And if this changes, then we know we need to run a computation, which is a function that determines what the end value of this signal should be. So this will be a string, because we're going to look at a value off of our premise resource. And then has premise updated returns a Boolean. So we define those here. Nope. What we building? All right. I'm going to keep working. What are we building? Let's flip. I think you're a little late to the party, but we're building a generative, using Gen AI to build an interactive story, choose your own adventure graphic novel. All right. So we've got our source, and this is going to look at this premise resource value story premise, just like the one above, and then the computation will be. All right, and this is a little trickier than the one above because we need to see if it's true. I think there's an equality operator here, but I'm not going to use it right now, even though that might be the better use case. In any case, we've got our new story premise. We're actually going to use it, so I'm not going to prepend it with an underscore. And then we have previous, and this parameter gives you access to the previous value of both the linked signal itself as well as the source, which can come in handy. So what we want to do here, I need to stop and think because logic is hard life. All right. So if the new premise does not equal the old premise, then we know the story has changed. So, and there's going to be more to this, but I'm going to start with that. All right. So so we will return new story premise. So does not equal previous dot source. And we're using source here because we want this the story premise. Now I'm getting a little error here, and that's because this is possibly undefined. When would this be undefined? Well, if we haven't actually run this before, in that case, previous, I think we could just do previous.source. That actually might work. However, I'm trying to think if there is a case where if there is no previous value at all, do we want to show this? This might work as is. You can let me know in the comments if I've messed something up, but let's give it a try. And on the other hand, the other thing we need to know, well, first let's just give this a try. All right, so we'll come in here. We didn't add it to our template yet. So where were we? Here. All right, so we'll just use a little let variable here, and we'll let show update button. And that'll equal to, let's just call this, what was it? Story service dot as story started. Let's see if that just, yep. What was the other thing? Premise resource. Premise resource dot is loading and not. And then the third condition I had was has the story started equal false. And the reason we need that is because what you'll notice is that this button is here as well. So once we start the story, we should never be able to click this button. We should never be able to hit the update the story. Has story started? I think that's in the story service. And the reason it's in the story service is because we use it in multiple places. Oh, looks like my camera feed has gone out.
Okay, so while Devin comes back to the stream, don't want anybody to think that we all disappeared. Devin will be right back. Let me answer some questions while he figures out his camera stuff. All right, so hi Angular team, please slow down the releases. Still, developers are not aligned with signals. Improve signals and some more demos. Else, some easy short videos help community learn easy way signals. All right, Jaya Krishna, thank you for this feedback. That's helpful to know. We're going to, I see you, Devin. Well, no longer see you. That's good feedback. So we do get this feedback a little bit often, which is it's kind of hard because if we don't continue to improve Angular, then people will be missing out on some of the great ideas that we have. We release every 6 months, and then we also try to make sure that things are backwards compatible. So that way, when we are updating, you're not forced into updates to code just yet, right? And we really try not to release breaking changes. So and if we do, we really make a big fuss about it to try to help people. So yeah, it's like stuck between a rock and a hard place. We can release or we cannot, but we're doing best we can. All right, let's see. I don't know what a skeleton React skeleton loader is. Let me know. Let's see. Devin was kidnapped.
No, I wasn't. I'm back.
The ransom has been paid, Joe Henderson. What's going on? Johan, thanks for coming back, Joe. I always want to say Johan, but it's also you used to have like Joe alternate. So is it Johan or just Joe? Like you tell me what you want to be called. What do you want to be called, Joe Henderson? Just let me know. Let's see. Michael Small says linked signal fields made. Okay, Joe, you got it. Linked signals fields made for resources. Yeah, the signal family is just amazing. I want to address one more comment real quick. Can we learn JavaScript from you? We don't have any dedicated JavaScript courses on Angular, but we do have dedicated Angular courses that include TypeScript. So you might learn a little bit there. Let's see. One other thing I want to let's see. Somebody said something about version 20. Version 20 is coming soon. Version 20 is coming soon. We just put out our initial invitation. Did you see the graphics? The beautiful graphics for our V20 invitation. They're so beautiful. Very, very excited. All right. It looks like Devin is back in the building. Okay, I'll let you folks continue.
All right, we're back. We're cooking. Let's give this a try. All right. So it's not working, but we got something. I think we have to fix our logic and our link signal. And Michael, I completely agree. I wouldn't say it's the only use case for it, but it's extremely useful for resources because it's this unknown data stream that you don't know what's going to come back, and you need some way to manage it. So let's go back to our story service and see if we can fix this logic. All right, so if we get our new story premise and it does not equal previous.source, I would think that would do it. But perhaps that is not where our issue lies. So let's do some debugging, shall we? So in our user input component, so what I'll do, I'm just going to comment that out. And let's see, that is the wrong line. This is the line. And then let's see, maybe I did something silly elsewhere. Let's run a little experiment and see what happens. I am reading this comment. Since signals won't change if the underlying value is the same as before, you can just do return true for the linked signal every time the dependency changes and set it to false manually whenever. Yes, so you can, but that's what I'm trying to avoid doing with linked signal. And basically what I'm getting at here is I want to take myself out of the equation. I just think that introduces more areas for potential bugs and just more work for me. I really like this idea of just creating a self-managing graph to the extent possible. So that's what I'm going to try to do here instead of this solution, which actually was the first thing I did when I built this app the first time. But now it doesn't seem to be working. So let's see if let's go back to our story service here and see if we can figure this out. All right, so let's see. So we're looking at our story premise. If the story premise equals the source, then we know. I'm also wondering if it has something to do with the fact that this might be undefined. So I think if there is no previous value, then we don't want to show it also, right? So if there is no previous value of the linked signal, in that case, I don't think we want to show this button. Let's see. So if there is no previous and previous.source, never, let's just do or an empty string here. Was that work? Nope. What did I do? So I never. Oh, because I'm saying yes, asserting no previous. Good point. This is the issue. Asserting previous. So I'm saying if there is no previous, that won't work because I'm basically saying this will be this. Then this part of this will always be won't be defined. So if there is no previous dot value, okay. Let's give that a try. And if you tuned in last time, this is often where I get tripped up. So I do enjoy the help from the community. All right, still not working. Let's see, so if there is no previous value, I actually want to just update, because I do think the other part of that let statement that we were working on just a minute ago is working. So let's just use that. Could always come back to it. Story service. All right. This is one. I might have cheated on this one and given myself the answer. Nope. I gave myself the answer on a few of these, but not this one. All right, folks, I can always just cheat and look at the source code, which, Mark, I know you're listening. Should we just do that to move on? What do you think? We can give it one more crack. I'm going to cheat, folks. Let us do that because I want to get to the more interesting stuff.
I'm
So
on mute. I've been talking to you and I've been on mute. I'm like, why can't he hear me? So I think that you may have narrowed it too far.
oh, okay. So let's see. I think that was in response to when I just had it like this. Because if there's no previous, then there's no previous dot source, of course.
Uh-huh.
So
So here's another thing you can do for your compute. It doesn't have to be a one-liner on line 38, right? You can well not is like 0, right? Like it doesn't make any difference. It'll just be if it's well, I guess not as that if it's undefined,
I
not
think
with
that
the
actually
false,
fixed it.
and then it turns into like it coerces in a way like your undefined to be a Boolean value when you do not.
Exactly. So I just had I was very close and I didn't cheat. So I didn't see it yet. So, all right. So basically, just to summarize what we did here, what I'm saying is if there is a value for previous and the new story premise does not equal the old story premise, then that's how we're going to set this. So now we can see this works.
Well, but before you go on, I was going to say the other thing you could do is just make it a full function and write the if statements out as opposed to doing like the one-liner kind of terser version, and then just write it out and make it more clear if you needed to. But if this is working, run it.
All right. So that seems to have worked. So initially, there's nothing. Next question. Now we've got this update story button. However, when we do that, we would also like that button to go away, right? So this is where Joe's suggestion actually comes in handy. And this is where having the linked signal operate the way it does is really useful because I'm kind of using a modified version of what Joe suggested. And I am going to manually set this to, I'm going to manually set as premise updated to false once I click the button. And this is one of the features of Link Signal. So to the extent I could, I created this self-managing graph, which I think is really great because I don't have to worry about when do I set this, when do I not set this, and so forth. But if I need it, I still have the flexibility to be able to set this manually, just like a signal. So back in our user component, user input component, in addition to this, which is a very long liner, we're always also going to say this dot story service dot has premise updated, and we're going to set that to false. And let's see if it works. Come in here, fantasy, update story, and now it's gone. And the final test here, let's do another one, see if it comes back. And it did. And then we update the story again, and we've got an updated story. And beautiful. All right, so the last thing I want to do here is show some kind of I want to style this a little bit better because one of the things that I don't like is how these buttons are all kind of different than like in this form here, I want the buttons to just expand to fill the full width, whereas here I don't. So I've got a little helper for myself. I'm just going to skip some of this. So basically, nope, that's not the one. We have something called where is it? In our user input component, we have a button class. I think it's next button container. Here, let's see. I'm just going to search next because I did this earlier. So we've got next button container. And I think what we want to do is, oh, that's what it is, a next button. All right. So basically, if this is in the if this is on the right side of the page where we continue the story, we'll call this a next button. Whereas if it's not going to be a next button. So if we go back to our template, we can now get rid of this, that our experiment is done. And what we want to do is, so we've got this next button, we've got our next button container, but we also have a few different buttons here. So we've got this button, and we're going to give it a class equal to, so let's call this, you know what? We're actually going to use the same thing in multiple places, which is where we can leverage this let syntax. So here, let's put this over here. So let's call this we'll call this button class equal to, and we want to know, so if description flow, then it'll be, do we have a class on the button? Let's see. Let's do nothing. Otherwise, we'll call this next button. All right. And now what we can do is we can apply this to, let's use it down here first. So we'll say class equals, let's see, what do we call that? Next button. We need a little class equals next button. All right, let's see if that worked. Come down here, and now you can see all of these are full width. And I think we'll do the same thing on these buttons too. So we can just copy paste that. Come over here. Let's see if that worked. Was that the right button? Handle submit. Next button. Nope, because it's called button class, as should this be called button class. So, aha, look at that. That's so much nicer. And up here, it doesn't do that. And then I think we also need the same thing on our update story button. But here you can see that we already have a class called update story. So this is where we could take advantage of yes, thank you. This is exactly what the issue was. Appreciate it. If I make mistakes, please chime in. It's really helpful. It's hard to do this live. So in any case, let's add that last one. So we can take advantage of one of the newer features. I think this was released in v19.2, which is template literal strings. So let's give this a try. So this will be, we'll make this our class, and we'll call this, let's see, update story. And then we will also add, what do we call this? Button class. Will that work? Let's give it a try. All right, so we're here. Let's give this a little reload. Cool, update story, and let's see how it looks down here. Yeah, and that's much nicer to look at. So that's just to show you what you can do with template literals to do something fun. Cool, so this is all looking really good. I think it's all working. And the last piece that we have is our images, which is a really fun one. So I'm gonna come in here, I have a few slides. So image component. So we've got 3 different versions of this. We've got the isLoading version, which is, we'll show a matte spinner, the actual image, in which case we'll obviously show the image. And then we have this reload icon, which is what's showing now, but doesn't actually do anything. So we'll fix that. And basically, the way this is going to work is what we'll do is we're going to issue a request to that generate image flow. And that generate image flow, I'll just show you because it is easier to just see it. What did I do? I just keep typing when I'm trying to find. Here we go. So this is our gen image flow. And basically what it does is it takes a story, like the text of a story. And this is a little bit different. The images are going to work a little bit differently than the stories because with the stories, we're returning 3 at a time. Whereas with the images, we're going to generate them 1 at a time. And there's a few different reasons to do this. I think the easiest one, and you'll see this when we actually run the app, and this is working, hopefully, is that it's faster. If we have to wait on Imagine to generate 3 images consecutively, that'll take a really long time. And also, it increases the chances that we'll have a failure in one that could possibly kind of mess up the whole thing. So with that, we have each one happening individually. And we'll take a story, and basically all we're going to output is a string, because what we're going to return is the image URL, and then we'll place that in the source of our template, and we're good. Now, this is one of the cool tricks that I discovered when working with Gemini, and I'm sure this is applicable to lots of different models. But the first time I did this, I generated the story text, and then I said, generate an image from the story text. And my images would be so weird. Like they would come out bizarre. And I was like, this doesn't exactly capture the story. So sometimes you just got to think a little bit more creatively about, what the LLM is doing. So I inserted this gen image blob flow, which has a little intermediate step. And basically what I do here is I say describe an image that captures the essence of this story. And I also included this. I think somebody asked on the last stream about image unfailing if it violated policies. I actually just inserted this right into my prompt to try to avoid that altogether. And I say return the string only, not JSON. And then what I do is I then pass that in to a flow that actually generates the image itself. And this was a really helpful trick to just kind of get this to generate images that were reflective of the story and really high quality. But I should also mention that I think Gemini came out with there were one or two more new Imagine models that came out. So I'm using Imagine 3. When I started building this, I think it was 2. So the quality just got a lot better as a result of that, which is cool. And all right, so with that, let's go back here, see if there's anything. So basically, there's 3 ways to, let's come back to this and let's just work on setting up the resource that captures this flow. So let's move to our image component here. All right, so we've got an image component. It has nothing in it. And let's go ahead and write this. So the first thing that we'll need is the story text, because if you remember from the flow, this flow takes the text of a story and generates an image. And that is going to come from the parent. And that way, one of the useful things about this is that, and I'll give you a little bit of backstory. The first time I built this, I actually included the image inside of the story component itself. And basically what it would do is it would wait on all 3 of the images to come back. And it would also, I had some method in there that would kind of track. I had some method in there that would basically say, all right, for each one of the story parts that you just generated, run this flow, generate the image, and return it. So for one, that was very slow. But 2, that also meant that I had to track all of the loading indices individually. or the loading statuses of the different images individually, as well as whether they failed. And I actually thought I was so slick when I did this. I came up with this signal-based method that it was like, it would have made a great coding interview question, like, how do you do all this? And then I took a step back and I was like, wait, what if I just have the image resource inside the image component and it'll just automatically run when it receives that input the first time it's created? And all that logic that I wrote that I was so proud of, I just threw it in the garbage because I didn't need it, because resource handles all that out of the box. So with that, let's write some code. So the first thing that we're going to do is we'll have a story text. We'll call it that. And we'll call this input that required, and this will be a string. Cool. And then, is that all we need? Could be. All right, so with that, if we are passing the story text in, that means in our story component, we've got an error because we need to pass in the story text. And the story text here will be story part. Cool, and that should fix the error. So now we know in our image component, we come in here, and now we can write our resource that actually generates that flow. So we'll call this image resource, and that is a resource. And that resource has a default value. We'll just make it an empty string. We've got a request, which will be, this will be the story text. And then we have our loader. And this takes the request as a parameter and runs a method. And this will run our run flow method. So run flow, and run flow takes a here URL, and the URL will be our image flow. That's just the endpoint that we set up earlier in our server.ts file. And then this also takes an input, and the input here, I'll go back to my flows, and I can see our input here, not this one, not that one, this one. So it takes the story, but it also takes the session ID. And the reason that we pass in the session ID is because that grants the LLM access to the history of our story to make the story images, or more rather the descriptions about the story images, more consistent. So if we go back to our image component, we have our story, which is our request. And then we have our session ID, which is going to come from our story service. And that will be story service dot session ID. All right. And default value. Seems we have an issue with our default value. What did I do here? All right. What I'm going to do in order to fix this is just see if we can get a clue from one of my other resources. No, looks like it follows the same pattern. Let's see. Why is this yelling at me? Does anyone else feel like when you see these little red squigglies, like the linter is actually yelling at you? Because I often do, and it makes me sad. But in any case, let's take a look. So I think the problem here is that we haven't actually defined a type for this resource. And I think we can fix that by just inserting a type in our loader. So let me see how I did this in our story service. So you can see here, I declared what the return type is, and it's a promise of a story premise. So if we go back to our image component, I think there are actually two ways to do this. I think the other way to do this is we can actually just write string there. Nope. Or we could say promise of a string. All right, I've got some. Oh, thank you. Oh. See, this is where I need your help. You're all yelling. You're like, look, this is the answer. You used an equal sign. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, everybody.
Hold on, I gotta answer this question for Alvin Gigi. Why is Flutter in the thumbnail? I don't even know what the tone was of this comment, but in my mind, it's like, why is Flutter in the thumbnail? Okay, so why is Flutter in the thumbnail for this video? We are a part of the same company, and we are partnering with the Flutter team to put on this Agentic Apps campaign. Are you interested in building Agentic Apps and exploring what AI-powered applications could mean for you? Well, join this campaign partnered with the Google Angular team and Google Flutter teams. So if you'd like to know more, go ahead and check it out. Thank you.
Cool. All right, with that, we are ready to. I think this is all we need, honestly, in this component. This is about it. So now that we have this, we have pretty much everything we need in order to do this. So if we come in here, right now, all I have is that placeholder. But what we want to do is we want to say there are 3 statuses. All right, and this is where my little that's not working. All right, we'll come back to that. So what we want to say is if the image status is loading or reloading, which is actually captured by the is loading status on the resource that captures both of these scenarios. And you'll notice here that I actually had both of these. I had like a little computed that calculated is loading, but I subsequently learned that is loading actually captures both of these statuses. So we don't even need this line. And then image resource.value, if it's an empty string, and the reason that is because I have some really simple try-catch logic in my flow, where basically if anything goes wrong, I just return an empty string, and that's how I know the request failed. There's lots of other ways to do that, but it seemed like a simple solution that worked for me. And then finally, if there is a value, then we'll just put the value in for the source. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say, all right, first things first. All right, so if image resource is loading, then we will show a loading spinner. And I'm bad at remembering things. So I'm just going to go in here and, yep, knew I did it. Just grab that. Okay, so I'll have our loading spinner. Else, if the image resource dot value equals an empty string, then we will put this in there. Otherwise, we will have an image, the source, equal to image, what was it? I think this needs to be binded image resource dot value. And I think that should do it, but I've made some sort of mistake. What did I do here? Unused else. Do I need to actually? No. You are missing a. I'm missing
a quote.
A quote. Thanks, everybody. A quote. Yes. Got it, Gary. Thanks. I love this community.
Wait, Gary was serious. Quote. Oh man, I love it. I love it.
This
And
must be so frustrating to watch sometimes.
no, I honestly think people enjoy helping because it's like that feeling of like, oh, I know the answer. You know what I mean? Like I want to help, but I think if we were ignoring them, they might be. But I think we're pretty good about getting feedback from people. Um,
Ugh,
yeah,
I agree, Gary. Incredible picture.
yeah. VT in the building when bad meets
Yep.
evil. Let's go,
All right. So
Alvin. No problem, bro. No problem.
with that. All right, there's one more thing that we need to do, which is add a click handler to this one. So here, in the event, you know what? Let's do that after. First, let's just check if this is even working at all. Oh, yeah, that's yelling at me too. All right, so let's see. So loading, that status works. Yep. Let's give this a go. All right, so, yep, all failed. All right. Yep, something here. Oh no, billing disabled. That can't be good. That would be highly disappointing. Like, no. All right, while that's going, what we're going to do is I also have, let's see, I had an image. Do I need to just add a class here? In any case, I am a little concerned that this is not going to work right now. Why would my billing be disabled? That would make me so sad. All right, so that I'd like to fix. But at a minimum, let's wire this up as if it did work. All right. So we've got this div, and let's say it failed like it keeps doing now. We could at least see if it's going to reload again. So what we could do is add a click handler. And basically, if this clicks, this is so easy. I don't even need a method. I just write image resource dot reload. Boom, done. Which is pretty cool to me that I've now taken the logic of loading, loaded, and reload, and all I needed to write was that one image, and this very short template here. And even though it's not working, which I hope we can get to the bottom of, let's see. All right, so even though that's not working, we can see, yep. All right, so I have a question here. So let's take that question. Should the image resource be loaded if story is something else than an empty string? So probably not. That's a good edge case that I don't check in this app, but yeah, that's a good point. Probably not. So good question, but I think you need a little bit more kind of advanced logic there, because what do you do then if the story is an empty string? Then I probably don't even want to load the image component, right? Probably don't even want to load the story part altogether. So if that were the case, I would probably move back up the component hierarchy and do some checking there. Like if the story is empty, then don't display this panel at all. But actually, I haven't run into that before where it's given me an empty story, but good question. All right, so that's working. I do want to fix this little CSS thing. So we've got a class of, you know what? I think it's maybe image placeholder. Let's see. Maybe this will work. This is just bothering me, so I'd like to fix it. Try one more time. Okay, so at least the styling's working. We know it's reloading. And if this is a billing issue, then I don't think, but why? This API method is going to be enabled. All right. So this was the miss. This was like the last piece that was going to bring it all together. And we did see it work last time. I might be able to fix this quickly, but I would need to go off screen for that for a sec. So, Mark, do you want to maybe see if we have any questions? And then
Yeah,
I
go
can
off
get.
screen,
Yeah,
fix that, and then I will chat with our friends here until you
cool.
can do that. Yeah, go ahead and do
Be
that.
right
What
back.
questions do you have, friends? Let's see. Chat got really sharp eyes. Yeah, no, I love when the chat helps. I mean, I think this is pretty good. I think this is pretty good. So far, I love a couple of things about this. Man, I love this setup with like my computer right here because then you know that I'm looking at the computer and I'm talking to you, friends. A couple of things about this. I love the fact that we're able to like leverage our Signals API in a really strong way. That's really fantastic. Let me hide this banner. I think we're done with it. I think you get it. Starter kits, examples. If you folks could definitely take a moment to star that repo, that will make my life so much better. In general, bring so much joy. What questions do you have, friends, at the chat? What questions do you have about this? Maybe about Angular. You can ask me about the future of Angular, and I can answer best I can. But yeah, this is really exciting. We got Angular V20 coming up. We got Google I/O coming up. Is anybody going to be at Google I/O this year who's watching from home? Angular has an area keynote, which we're going to be sharing some updates about Angular there. And then we got a big show that we're working on right now for Angular V20, which will be premiering on May 29th, I believe. Is when the V20 show premieres. Angular V20 comes out that week. I mean, so many exciting things. So many exciting things. I just cannot wait. Cannot wait for you all to see what we've been working on. Uh, yeah, it's been exciting. Let's see what else. What else? What else? What else can we chat about while Devin fixes his? Do you all like these live streams? I feel like you do. I've seen a lot of comments where people are just like, more live stream, more apps. So we promised you more app development during the live stream, and so we are hopefully able to deliver here. Here's a question: do you work with Index? Any plans to make it part of the default NG new setup? Probably not default. We collaborate with a lot of teams, meaning there's a lot of teams who create products, and so like we talk with our friends at WebStorm for like support and just getting them to like giving them information about how they can make their product work with Angular. Same thing with NX. Was NX is a really interesting story because Narwhal, their first version of NX was just like a wrapper around the Angular CLI, and since then they have gone so far and above and beyond to create some really incredible tooling and infrastructure tools and platforms. Really, really fantastic. But yeah, no plans to really make it a part of the NG new setup. With Angular, by default, you can do something similar if you want to do like a mono repo or want to have multiple projects in the same like space. We have workspace support, but that's kind of where we are right now on that one. But good question. Oh, I appreciate that. I love the live streams. Okay, we're going to keep doing more. We're actually actively talking, especially Devin and I, because I want to bring more engineering members. Like so, Devin and I work in DevRel, and then we have more of our developers on the community. Devin, your camera is still off, bro. But we want to do more live streams. I want to bring more people from the Angular team on the live streams. I would love to get somebody like Alex Rickabaugh, one of our leads, who is a fountain, a wellspring of knowledge. I mean, this man knows so much about Angular and has a lot of interesting insights. We'd love to get him on the stream. Yeah, I think you could do a lot. I think we could do a lot with the live streams, and so we're trying to see if it makes sense to bring more focus to the live streams to do more of this. If it does, I mean, we'll do more. Like I love building apps on live streams. It's a great way to code. I know Jeremy, our TL for the Angular team, he loves these because he gets to have some fun coding too. So that's pretty good. Michael Small says, got dozens of apps in Angular workspace, works fine for us. Could stand app enhancements. Angular JSON is huge. I believe that. That makes a lot of sense. Can we have a starter pack on the Angular account with team members and Angular GDEs? Ooh, we might be able to make a starter pack. We might be able to do that. Devin, let's note of that to talk about how we can use Blue Sky to make a starter pack. That could be good. Let's see. I would love if Angular JSON has support for splitting, kind of like TS config. Joe, that's really good feedback. It's really good feedback. Let's see. If I'm new to Angular, should I start from signals or RxJS preferable? Okay. If you're new to Angular, we have a tutorial for you that you can just start with. So definitely check that out. You should start with signals, but don't forsake observables because observables serve a different problem. So you should definitely want to get both. Okay, let's see. Bring Jean-Mich. Oh wait, Jean-Mich. That's Matthew. We should bring Matthew. He's a great dude. Matthew is one of those people that makes my brain melt about how like much stuff he gets done. It's like wild. All right. I think we want to try to get to the end of this, but keep your comments coming, and then we're gonna wrap up soon anyway. Once we wrap the stream, we will have answer a few more questions. But yeah, the splitting thing, I'll say one thing, Joe. Put a feature request in. This is it's good feedback. Put a feature request in.
All right. Well, I figured out the issue. And it was that at 4 a.m., my billing account was automatically downgraded. So I couldn't.
Oh, it was a billing issue.
Yeah. So I think due to probably inactivity or something, it was automatically downgraded. So I have restored it, but it might take a few minutes to actually work. So we can hang out, see if it works. I promise it does. If you run this on your own, and just to make this a little clearer, so it's only the imagine part that's not working, and you'll notice the other part is. And the reason for that is because imagine's through Vertex AI, which you actually do need, I think, some sort of billing account set up in your cloud project. Whereas the rest of it, you can just do for free, all of the kind of text-based generative AI features. Whereas the image part, you actually, using Vertex AI, you do need to have some sort of billing in there. So I've restored mine. I was hoping this would work.
Yeah.
It
I
probably
want to
will
make
in the
one
next
quick
few minutes.
clarification, Devin, before you continue. With a lot of these things, you do have to set up a billing account, but there is a no cost available like tier for a lot of these things. So try out the no cost version, and then make sure you set up those billing accounts. But like I feel like you probably won't incur any major anything if you're just trying these things out. But be mindful. Use Firebase Console if you're going to be using like any of the cloud things, and make sure you check your billing account to stay up to date.
While we're here, I do want to, I'm going to kill some time while this billing just takes some time to propagate. So if we go here, I want to show you this cool command. So this is really cool when you're working with Genkit. I think I have it in here. No? Oh, that's so sad. All right, I'll need to add that to the, there's a command that you can use with ngserve. So I think if it's npx genkit start. So if you do need I think it's the Genkit CLI installed in order to do this. But I want to demonstrate this functionality because it's really cool, especially if you're debugging and say it isn't something as simple as a client issue. Because when you're working with AI and Genkit, it can get you can get all sorts of different errors depending on your app, depending on what you're doing. And there's a Genkit UI that makes this a lot easier to troubleshoot, test, and debug. And if you use this command, npx genkit start, and then -- your command, in our case, ngserve, what this will do is it'll serve our app, but it'll also create issue. Major version, could not determine executable. Oh, all sorts of fun. Well, usually what this does is it creates it creates a Genkit UI for you, where you can interactively go into the browser and actually see how all of these are running. Let's see why this isn't working. I might just be using the wrong command. Let me see something real quick. Give me 1 sec, folks.
All right.
Bear
Well, as you
with me.
debug that, I'm going to answer another question. Is it possible to use Angular and Flutter like it happens in Ionic? No, we currently do not have any integration like this. If you want to use mobile apps right now, you got like Ionic and you have NativeScript or two of the like community solutions. Check out r/Angular on Reddit. Somebody put like a links example that they got working. So if you want to do mobile, and then there's always PWAs, right? We can install the web app directly on your phone. I think PWAs are fantastic, so it's pretty good. Let's see. Node issues, RM-RF, all my modules. Yo, listen, I've done that before. I just have to clean them joints out. Just like, you know what? It ain't working. It ain't working.
So what I was doing is sorry to interrupt. We have this in the Genkit docs. There's an Angular starter kit, quick start guide, and I was just checking if my command was right because I knew it was in here, and this is the command I was running. But for whatever reason, it's not working, sadly. So I don't think this is one I'll be able to troubleshoot live. However, I'm hoping enough time has passed where perhaps this might work. So let's, while this is loading, Gary says, I love watching Code TV dev challenges. I know someone who knows a bit about that. Could we have dev challenges which use Angular? Angular is the framework. Sounds
Well, as somebody who is on Code TV, I don't know if you watch the show Lead Heat that I'm on. Maybe I'll reach out to Code TV team and see if we can do something like that. That could be pretty fun. I think people could really benefit from just more exposure to some of the great work that we're doing on the Angular team and watch Lead Heat. I'm soliciting that as a regular person. Okay, this is not a stupid question. There are no stupid questions. Where will you keep the code after this is live? Guess what? We have a place. Let me get that banner for you. We have a place for that. It's on our GitHub in the examples folder. So hold on, I'm going to make this better because it's a ticker right now. Okay, like this. Bop. Okay, so here's where you can get the code. I'll put the link on the screen for you. GitHub.com/Angular/examples. Go ahead and hit those stars. Listen, friends, if you want to make us float into the atmosphere with joy, let's get 32 people to start this repository before the end of the stream. 32 people. Get us across 200. That will be bananas. Yeah.
Yeah. And while we're waiting, I was going to say this at the beginning, but I just want to thank the community for being so awesome and welcoming. This is my 3rd live stream. And if I'm being honest, it's a little intimidating coming into a community like this and just coding live on the air. And I feel like everyone's been extremely friendly, welcoming, helpful. And I feel like I'm feeling the love. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. And I look forward to doing more of this and hopefully meeting a lot of you in person. That would be really fun for me. All right. I think, I don't know if this is going to work. It'll probably work the second we end the stream. That's generally how these live demos seem to go. But in any case, I think there were a few other things. Oh, actually, what time we have? There was one other feature. I don't know if we actually did this. So I don't know if you all noticed this, but when you make a decision, and let's see if we have time for this. So we've got this banner here, not a good choice, but not a bad one, try again. But I think right now that's actually hard-coded. And what we want to do is we want to show this dynamically. And I think this is a feature I just completely forgot to implement. And that would be this one. All right. So we're going to get a rating text. Should we do this now?
Can you do it in 5 minutes?
5 minutes? I think we could do it. All right.
Let's go.
Let's do it. All right. So in our user input component, we have our rating. And basically, we want to show this rating if, and one thing you'll notice, actually, do I have this here? Yeah, so it's showing here too. That shouldn't be showing, right? So I want to say if if you you might not remember, but in our user component, we have an input called, where is it? Rating. And the rating's only passed in by the story component as a parent. So we know if there's a rating, then we should show that text. But we need to know what text to create. So I've got this little rating text map here. And what I'll do is I'm basically just going to have a computed called rating text. And that is a computed, I do that last time too, computer. Computed. And what this is going to be is we're just going to take this we'll take rating text, this dot rating. And yep. Rating or nothing. Yeah, it should do it. All right, so now we've got our rating text in our user input component. Instead of this, we're going to show our rating text. Again, I forgot those. But we're only going to show this if rating text. Got my ampersand. All right, let's give that a quick look, see if it works. While that's loading, what we're also going to do is we want to color these. So what we can do, and I cheated here, and I just put the code here because I couldn't remember. We'll use string interpolation again. And basically what we'll just do is we'll say, oh, can I grab that? All right, so let's just replace this here. Set our class. Already got the classes written. And so there's no now you can see there's no rating text because nothing happened. So there's no rating, so there's nothing to show. However, if we begin our adventure, now we've got an issue. Of course. Let's just try that again. And this will probably be the last feature. Are these mockups also on Git? I've got some of the mockups up there. Thank you, appreciate that. And are these mockups also on Git? I think there are some of the mockups in the GitHub repository. All right, so now that that's loaded, we're going to try this one more time. And this will, I think, be the last thing that we do today. And if it works, fantastic. If not, well, we had fun. And hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you learned a lot. And it sounds like folks are enjoying these. I'd love to do more. So hopefully we can do that. We can make that happen. All right, last attempt. No rating text. Let's see it. Oh, goodness. I'm just going to flip over here. Yeah, oh no, that's the billing issue. See if. Actually, instead of that, I think instead of checking if there's rating text, let's do that, see if it works. All right, last attempt, and then I think we might call it, because if we have any more fun, we might explode. No. No, but this is all fun. All right. And just a reminder, all the final code is there in the GitHub repository. So if you do want to see it, if you do want to see the working version of it, there is the fully functioning version. So it looks like our rating is actually showing, but the rating text isn't showing properly. So let's take a look at this. And this is probably just a an issue with this. Let's see, rating text. Let me try something else. That. What if we did that work? No, I think I need to have that. I think that was right. Not positive why this is not working, but maybe someone sees something I don't. All right, we'll give this one more try. And no, our rating text isn't showing. All right, might be time to call it. We've got a few more minutes, but maybe we should just say our goodbyes.
Listen, this just gives us something else that we can continue with on a future live stream. Friends, it has been absolutely stellar to be with you for another Angular live stream. Thank you for hanging out. Give big shout out to Devin for all the hard work and all things that he's done to make this happen. Definitely put some emojis in the chat. I want to see him. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for talking. Devin, real quick before you sign off, what are you watching, reading, and playing?
All right. What am I think I answered this last time we had a stream. I am still reading Shogun, though I have not been reading it as much. I probably should be. I just finished watching the latest season of The Wheel of Time, which I really enjoyed, having never read any of the books. I feel like anyone who read the books would probably not like it as much, but I didn't, so I enjoyed it. And then what am I playing? I actually just finished playing Luigi's Mansion 3 with my son. So
Fantastic.
got to find the next game if anyone has suggestions.
Yeah, buy a Switch 2 and play Mario Kart World.
Yeah, is it good?
I don't know. I don't have one.
Yeah.
I'm not buying one anytime soon. My
I
son
wasn't
needs
planning
to.
on it.
Yeah, so my son needs to appreciate the gifts that he already has before we go diving into new stuff. Let's see. What am I watching, reading, playing? Watching NBA playoffs. Let's go Golden State Warriors. I believe in you. What am I reading? I'm on book 4 of the Murderbot series. That series is so good. So good. I love it so far. And what am I playing? I am playing mostly like still playing guitar actually. I'm doing this 75 days of hobbies challenge that I made up. I mentioned it, I think, on the last stream that I was going to do this thing with Jeremy. And since then, I've played guitar for over an hour and a half every day just to really level up my skills. And it's been fun. I've been posting little clips on the internet of myself playing guitar. Super great. People are liking the streams. I'm so glad you are. You're welcome. Thanks for coming by. Awesome. So glad you had a great time. Great, incredible. Yeah, bring us incredible streams. Listen, we're gonna keep doing more of these. We're finding that the streets are coming to hang out, which is what we need, which is what motivates us to say, like, hey, if people are actually gonna watch, then we will actually do it, right? So, but you got to watch what you all have been doing, which is excellent. So here's what I'm going to say to you. We got a couple of big things coming up that I would love your support on. We would really love your support. The week of May 20th, so 21st and 20th, so May 21, May 22, there is Google I/O. We'll be having our area keynote. So watch the main keynote, see all the cool things that Google is working on, and all the cool updates for cross teams at Google. But then Angular has our own keynote on May 22nd, which Devin and I will be in Mountain View, California at Shoreline giving this keynote live. We are so thrilled about it. We've been working on it. It's a lot of work and we're having a great time preparing for that. So we'll be live for that. So definitely check out the Google I/O keynote for Google I/O and the Angular keynote, and then come right back. Literally, you watch that and then you go home and you feel all good. And then you come right back to the Angular channel on May 29th for the Angular version 20 developer event, where we're going to just drop all the features that we've been working on since the V19 release. It's going to be so much fun. We really hope that you like what we've been up to. Devin, before I say goodbye, any last words?
Thanks, everybody. And yeah, look out for both of those. So much work has gone into this V20 release, especially from Mark, who would never say it himself, what he's been doing behind the scenes. He has been just moving mountains to make not only just, I mean, obviously the whole team's working on the features, but to make this event something special for you all. You have no idea how hard he works on this. So please tune in. It's going to be awesome.
Wow. Okay. Well, with that, thank you for that, Devin. That's really thoughtful. So I'll just say this, friends. Everything is great out there, and you can't really make a wrong choice. So whatever you build, whatever you do, whatever you choose, just make sure you get out there and build great apps. See you the next time. Cheers.